Hello, and welcome to the Success Showcase. I'm your host, Eric Lopkin with the Modern Observer Group. And with me, as always, is Chip Janiszewski from the Happiness and Success GPS. Chip, how you doing today?
Doing great, Eric. How about you?
Doing fantastic.
We finally survived our first cold spell of the year, and for the first time in probably about 5 or 6 days, it's actually a little bit above freezing today. But
Yeah,
it's
this cold snap has hit most of the country, and in some parts, it's actually been dangerous. So we hope our listeners have been staying warm, and hopefully it'll start warming up all over.
Yeah, and that's basically what's supposed to happen. Because looking at the weather a couple of days ago, coming from the Southwest, which is the Pacific Ocean, all over the country, it's going to warm up. But I do a Zoom every single Sunday morning from a group of mine, and one of the people zooms in from South Carolina, and it was 9 degrees down there yesterday, even a little colder than it was up here.
Oh, wow.
So her pool was an ice skating rink. Just kidding, but
Yeah, my son moved down to Virginia and he has been very pissed this year because it's been colder there than it has been here and they got more snow than we did. So
yeah,
he thought he was escaping all that.
nope, it's following him. That's too bad.
So today we are going to talk about the art of active listening. And if you've been listening to our podcasts over the last several months, we've been talking a lot about how to recover from burnout and mental health. We spoke about grief, and a big part of this is being able to listen to people. And that's how you can help them. And as we mentioned in our recent two-part episode with Lighting the Candle, a World That Works, where we talked about grief and bereavement, one of the big problems that people have is they want to fix things. And certain things just can't be fixed that easily. And when that's the case, what you need to be able to do is listen. And for most of us, we don't actively practice that. We hear, but we don't listen.
Yeah, absolutely. And To be an active listener is the most important thing you can do as far as relationships go. I mean, everybody loves to talk, but if you ever want to get anybody's respect, as much as you want to help them or anything else, you have to begin with listening. And I mean, we've talked on and on again about how people have differing opinions. We talked about my platforms, and everybody's got different platforms, and so on and so forth. But if all you are is me, this is what I believe, this is what I believe, I don't care what you think about, and so on and so forth, you're not only not going to get what you want, you're going backwards. You're going nowhere. And you could have the best cause in the world, but if that's the way that you're coming on to other people, it's it's not the right way to do it. So the most important thing you can do, I mean, it's rule number 6 in how to win friends and influence people. Seek first to understand, then to be understood.
And there are so many benefits to actually actively listening. And most people don't realize, you know, I have heard so many people say, I can't remember people's names. And the fact of the matter is, for most of us, it's not that we're not remembering their name, it's that we didn't listen when it was said in the first place. So you'll find when you're actively listening, one of the big benefits is that you remember more because you're hearing it and you're listening to it when it's actually said. And you have no idea how much this impresses people later on down the line. Running networking events for so many years, I meet a lot of people. And one person came to our event. This is going back a number of years. And we had a conversation. And then they didn't come back for a while. When they came back, I said, well, the last time you were here, you told me your wife was pregnant. She's got to have had the kid by now. And this impressed him so much because I had remembered that his wife was pregnant after just that one mention at one meeting. Well, that's because I was listening. And when you use active listening, yeah, people are amazed at how much you can remember of what they tell you and about your conversations. And of course, the first part of this is during the conversation, you need to be present. You actually need to be focusing on what's being said. Most people during a conversation spend more time thinking about what they're going to say next when the person stops speaking than actually listening to what's being said.
Yep, that's and that's just the truth. I mean, basically, we talked about a grief and so on and so forth last week, and a lot of other things that we've talked about over the last couple of months, really. People are basically insecure. And that's the way, as we're growing up, being exposed to this and that and so on and so forth, we all, in one way or another, develop an inferiority complex. And what do we do to correct that? We speak out a little bit. We may disagree and so on and so forth. And, it's, hey, like, look at me and so on and so forth. And we're doing it for ourselves, not because we want it, but really because we think we need it. And it's really, really a tough thing to get over. But you will find that once you start listening to people, and just like you said, bringing something up later on that people didn't even realize that you were listening. I mean, that it does two things. As far as insecurity goes, that person's insecurity all of a sudden is gone for that minute because, hey, somebody else besides me cares about myself. And number two, their attitude towards you is skyrocketing. And the best thing that we have to give is ourselves. And we all have a whole bunch of great things going on for ourselves. And the more that you can start a conversation by reminiscing about something with somebody, the better off you're going to be. I mean, that's a great way to start a conversation is last time I talked to you, or how are you doing with the grandchildren, or how you're doing with this and how you're doing with that and so on and so forth. And regardless of whether you're talking about something serious, confrontational, or just getting together, that's a fantastic way to just break the ice and calm everything down no matter what you're facing.
Absolutely. It's like when you're listening to the conversation and you're actively participating, you remember more of it. You can bring up more of it and you can respond better. Um, there's actually something that people are taught when they take improv classes, which is called a callback. And it's, to bring up something that one of the other people on stage said later on in the scene to move the scene forward. And the same thing works in conversation. When you can bring something up that the other person said, well, one, it actually shows them that, yes, you were listening. And two, it gives them something else to start talking about. They can elaborate more. And that pushes the conversation forward rather than just interrupting and taking it in the direction you want it to go, which they may not have anything to add. So this keeps the conversation flowing. And the more it flows, the more you have to listen to, the better you get to know and understand someone.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, you know me, I go and do a little bit of online research before we start doing these podcasts and found a bulleted list. The benefits of active listening are as follows. Number one, it builds trust and strong relationships, just like we talked about. Number two, it helps to resolve conflict. Number three, it prevents us from missing important information. Number four, it helps to build more knowledge. Number five, it enables us to identify or anticipate problems. And number six, and most important, it just helps us in better understanding things. And it really is all about building trust and strong relationships. It all starts with listening.
It does. And another little hint that most people don't realize is that when you're actively listening, you're not just using your hearing. You're looking for nonverbal cues, facial expressions, body language. That you're listening for not just what's being said, but how it's being said, tone of voice. You're using other senses to get the entire message. And that's also very important because, I mean, we see it all of the time in the media where somebody will say something and then it will be reported. They'll talk about 5 words that were said, missing the entire message and taking it completely out of context. When you use active listening, when you're actually hearing everything that's being said, when you're looking for the nonverbal cues and seeing body language and hearing tone of voice, you know when something is being said sarcastically. You know when somebody is trying to make a joke. You know when someone is trying to do the opposite of what they're saying. Ironically, if you just hear the words, you miss all of that. And it's one of the big problems that people have with texts and emails because you don't have those nonverbal cues, you don't have tone of voice. So, very often, something can be taken the wrong way. When you're in person or even on a video call, you want to be watching for nonverbal cues. You want to be getting the whole message and not guessing at what somebody means. And part of active listening is actually saying to the other person, wait, did you mean such and such? Or wait, say that again. I don't think I understood you. Ask questions to bring out more clarity if you're not sure what's being said.
Yeah, absolutely. What are the 3 basic skills of listening? And you just talked about, instead of just hearing, listening is not the same as hearing. And as you just said, listening is a conscious activity and it's based upon 3 basic skills. And this person called it the triple A listening. And the 3 A's are: number one, attitude. That's what are you going in doing now? Are you coming in with a preconceived notion, or are you there just really to listen to that person? Number 2 is attention. And it's not just hearing like you're talking about. It is things like expression. Eye contact is so, so important to show the interest in the people. And then number 3, adjustment. Just like you're saying, if you don't understand, ask a question so you can understand. Basically, a positive attitude paves the way for open-mindedness. And by keeping these 3 A's in mind, your attitude towards that person and the conversation, paying 100% attention to it, and then adjusting if you don't understand something or if you have something positive to add. That's what it's all about. It's not just a conscious activity like just hearing. It's an art.
That is so true. And in fact, you mentioned eye contact when you were talking about attention. When you're actually keeping eye contact with someone, you are hearing them better. You're listening. It helps you to listen. And in fact, I used to laugh when my mother would say this, but she would actually say periodically, wait a minute, I didn't hear you. I don't have my glasses on. And of course, as a kid, it's like, well, what do your glasses have to do with hearing? Well, it actually does, because when you're looking at someone's face, when you're making eye contact, you're hearing what they're saying better and you're listening more. So there is a correlation between attention, eye contact, and how well you're listening to a conversation and absorbing what's being said.
Yeah, absolutely. Another word for this is just becoming engaged in the conversation. And obviously, we have talked about sales tools and so on and so forth. And they have an 80-20 rule for sales. And it says the 80-20 rule of active listening says that in any sales conversation, the sales rep should spend 80% of the time listening and only 20% of the time talking. And obviously, sales is not about pushing products and services. It's about serving somebody, making their life easier, making them feel comfortable, and so on and so forth. And unless you know what they are looking for by listening to them, you're not going to know that. And I will take that one step further. The 80-20 rule of active listening also applies to life.
Yes,
Apply
it does.
apply it to your life's relationships. And just as you said, by bringing up that in that conversation with that person, something that you would remember from the last time, it just blew that person away. And that's what it's all about. And it's not hard to do. What you may want to do to build yourself into that practice, I always walk around with my little sheet of paper to write down things that I got to do as far as appointments and so on and so forth. But sometimes I'll just write down notes. And if you just write down a name of a person and something about that so that you can commit that to memory because you know you're going to see that person again and keep that in mind, that goes a long way also. It's a great way to train yourself, especially if things kind of go in one ear and out the other and you forget things, even though you don't intend to, like I do. So,
That's very true. People know when you're not listening. And in a sales situation, nobody wants to buy from someone who's not paying attention to their needs. How are they going to be able to solve my problem if they're not even listening to what the problem is? But in life, that listening creates a relationship. And very often, if people are telling you, especially if they're telling you something very personal, they don't necessarily want you to do anything about it. They just want you to listen. They want to be heard. And when they know you're listening, that creates that deeper connection. So whether it's talking with a friend, talking with a sales prospect, meeting someone for the first time, active listening cements that relationship and it allows you to move it forward into something that can be much more productive. In the case of a sales relationship, it can lead to lifelong customers, it can lead to referrals. In the case of everyday life, it leads to people trusting you. And quite frankly, it leads to people trusting you in the sales process also, which is useful. But it helps you to build that trust. And that's so important. We often use the phrase, people do business with people they know, like, and trust. Well, that trust is the hardest part of that to build. And active listening helps you do that. And again, a, the biggest part of active listening is the understanding of what the conversation is. Whether it's a business or a personal conversation doesn't matter. You need to understand what is being said. So don't hesitate to ask questions, but don't ask yes or no questions. Ask open ended questions, questions that push the conversation forward and elicit more of a response. It's very easy for someone to say yes or no and then stop talking. And that might or might not have clarified things for you. When you ask an open ended question, it allows the conversation to move forward, gives you even more information, and really gets your understanding to a new level. And again, you can always ask them to repeat something, ask them to clarify something, but ask those open ended questions to keep moving forward and delve into a deeper understanding.
yeah, just the art of asking a question pushes things along in a positive way like people wouldn't believe. It's just amazing because that is the best way to show interest in people. We both of us teach people networking and we teach people, okay, how do you go to a networking meeting? I'm a shy person and so on and so forth. How do I break the ice with people? I'm really, really shy. And I always tell people, I'm sure you do too, the best thing to do is just to walk up to somebody, maybe they're wearing a name badge or something or whatever, and just say, hey, I'm Chip. What's your name and what do you do? and then just be quiet, look them straight in the eye, and start listening to them. And that automatically starts building the trust, makes them comfortable, and starts to get them going. It's so, so important to do that. It's really tough. I mean, we talk about sales as far as approaching somebody and they know whether you're just trying to, make a buck off them and so on and so forth. Listening is so important to enhance or even mend personal relationships. The bottom line is the better you know somebody, the more baggage that you have with each other. And if you can just really, it's very, very tough to do, but I'm just throwing out there for the sake of not arguing. But if you can go in there and throw aside all assumptions and just go in there to listen to people, it's so, so important with loved ones, with people that you're talking to as far as business goes. But I'm saying, especially with your close friends and your loved ones, because I'm sure that you see and you're pained sometimes by the relationships between maybe your brother and your sister or this and that, whatever, or other people who are really, really wonderful people, but just can't get along with each other. And hey, this person is having a party. Should I invite this person or is there going to be blowups and so on and so forth? If you can really make a conscious effort to pause and set aside everything that's happened in the past, everything you're worried about in the future with that person, that loved one, that friend, wherever you're talking to that you know really well, and just let it flow from a positive standpoint. That, number one, will be a wonderful experience there, but it also could be step one in rekindling what might have been an awesome relationship before.
Exactly. Part of actively listening is not judging. Just listen to what the person has to say. You don't have to agree. And in fact, as long as you're disagreeing politely, that can be a way to move the conversation forward. And you can pose it as a question as, well, what about if such and such? Or, wait, am I understanding this correctly? You know, reflect what they're saying back to them, especially if you're not clear on it. So what you're saying is XYZ. If it's not, they'll clarify it, they'll correct you, which is key to avoiding misunderstandings further down the line. If you did understand it properly, they're going to feel that much better about the conversation because they know you're really listening and you're understanding. So you can reflect questions back, you can reflect thoughts back to make sure that you're understanding. But you have to do it without judgment. That is key. Nothing will shut down a conversation faster than judging. And quite frankly, let's be realistic about this. You don't want them judging you, so why should you be judging them? Conversations need to be free flow of ideas. Judgment shuts that down, and you don't want that to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, we all have our insecurities, and judgment is a way to protect that. Basically, misery loves company. And if you're going to be miserable, you want to make sure that everybody knows that they're not perfect too. And that's just human nature. There's nothing wrong with you. That's just the way things are. And if you can really look at yourself in the mirror and understand that and realize that, and you're the one in the group of people that are talking and somebody might be trashing somebody else, maybe you can say something good about that person that's absolutely true too, to just change the trend for everybody there. And maybe they'll understand that they can do that type of thing too. I mean, basically, it's all an attitude, and a lot of this takes practice, and you got to turn this into a habit. And obviously, I talk about positivity all the time because that's what I teach. But if you can turn your response to the situation that you're in into something positive, and listening is the way to start with that, listening with a positive attitude towards things, throwing out all judgment, then magic happens. And that's just the way it is. And that will attract more people to you. It will make you more of an influence on people. just by being who you are. And it's not like you're trying to go out there and influencing people. You don't influence people by talking to them. You influence people by being.
Exactly. And I do want to hop on one word that you just mentioned briefly: practice. Active listening requires practice, practice, practice. How do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice. Listening is a skill like any other. The more you practice it, the better you get at it. And it's not going to materialize just by itself. You need to actively do it. So, any chance you get, listen to somebody. Practice active listening. The more you practice, the better you'll get at it. And there are so many benefits, as we've said. You really do want to be an active listener. And finally, we're almost out of time, but the final element of being an active listener and practicing active listening is that you need to be patient. People talk at different rates. People may need time to think about what they're saying. And so many people, I'm sure you've seen this over and over again, will sort of talk in a circle until they get to the point that they really want to make, because they're trying to find the right words, and they keep going, but it's not quite right for them. Be patient. Active listening requires patience. And that's one of the final keys in doing this. And as we've said, there are so many benefits to actively listening. It builds trust, it builds relationships, it helps you remember. And people, when they're asked, so how did you like the guy? How did you like that woman? How did you like the event? If they've been listened to, they will tend to say, "Oh, I had the greatest conversation." You might not have said anything, but the fact that you were listening makes an impact. All right, so we are just about at the end of our time. So, Chip, what do you think is the big takeaway for our listeners this week?
Well, I uncovered one quote, a little bit long, but it says, truly hearing is how you can uncover the other person's truth. And when you know their truth, you can better understand, support, empathize, and partner with them. This is what listening to learn and understand is all about. And it's increasingly important for leaders in today's evolving hybrid workplace and world. I mean, we're exposed to all these different things. So we talked about practice. I like that AAA listening, attitude, attention, and adjustment. And you talked about patience, and all the time I talk about Lao Tzu's three treasures. Your three most important treasures are simplicity in the situation. Number two is patience. And this includes the listening to people ramble on and on and on and on. That will help them because number one, their attitude towards you and towards themselves, because you're actually listening to them, it's going to help them out. And then number three, part of the reason you're going to be doing that is because you are treating every moment with compassion. Simplicity, patience, compassion. I bring this up all the time. Our three greatest treasures, and they truly are.
Absolutely. I think for me, the big takeaway is that active listening has so many benefits. And since the first step in it is being present and actually paying attention to what's going on, being mindful about a conversation, you absorb so much more of it. You don't know where that's going to lead. There could be a gem in there that's going to bring a future opportunity. There, you could be building a relationship that's going to improve your life. You don't know. But by being present in a conversation and actively listening, you open up so many doors. And that just builds so much potential. You've been listening to the Success Showcase. You can catch every episode at xvadio.com, the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts. Remember, make this your best week ever and make next week even better. We'll see you then.